Hey, what up? In this tutorial, I'll show you how to code up this Flappy Bird game using Flutter and Flame. Flame is a game engine that's built on top of Flutter, and it runs on mobile, desktop, and web. So you can see some examples of games that are made by this, and also you can go to the documentation to get further detail. But I can show you real quick how to get started. So firstly, let's go to Google, and I want you to type in Flappy Bird sprites. Click on this first one here and you can see that it's got all the images. So let's click download this sheet and let's bring it to my desktop, and I've got my Flutter project right there as well. So if you open up this sprite sheet, you can see it's got all the assets that we need for the game. For this tutorial, what I'm going to do is let's grab the background and we'll grab a couple of these pipes as well as a Flappy Bird image and also maybe the ground as well. Now, firstly, I want you to just copy this and create a few more, because what I'm going to do is if you open up one of these, let's say I want to grab this background, then I'm going to just crop it out and save it, and then I'm just going to call this background. And let's do the same thing for the ground. As well as the bird. And the pipes. So we got the top pipe and then the bottom pipe. Sweet, then open up your Flutter project and let's create a new folder called assets, and I just want you to bring these into this folder. So if I just open up my Flutter project, let's go to our pubspec.yaml, and if you scroll down, you can see the assets section. So let's comment this out and then specify which folder we have it in. And also if you scroll up, you got the dependencies, and we're going to use the Flame engine. And then let's just save it. So you should just have this demo counter app. So what I'm going to do is just delete everything below the main function to start this from scratch. So I'm going to create my app, and in the material app, if you start typing game widget, you can see there it is. So I'm going to hit enter to auto import, and we have to give it the game. So we haven't created this yet, but I'm going to call it Flappy Bird game. So in our library, let's create a new file called game.dart, and let's create this Flappy Bird game and extend the Flame game. Cool, so if you save this and I come back to the main.dart file, you should be able to import it. And so now we can just work with this Flappy Bird game class. So I'm going to write enough comments to make it clear what we're doing. So the basic game components we're going to implement here are the bird, background, ground, pipes, as well as the score. So let's just start off with the bird. Now it's a good idea to put this in a folder called components. And what you want to say for this bird class, you want to extend the sprite component. So let's start by initializing the bird, specifically the position and the size. For the position, let's just start off at 100, 100. And for the size, let's say 60 for the width and 40 for the height. Get a quick diagram just to make it visually more clear what's going on, especially when it comes to the vector position and size. So on the top left, this is the starting position, so 0, 0. And then let's imagine that the width is A. Then this coordinate is going to be A0. And similarly, if this height is B, then we got 0B. And finally AB. So this is kind of the origin, and everything is going downwards like this. So if you ever get confused, just look at this diagram. And then we have the physical world properties. So what we mean is we got the velocity of the bird, which will start off as 0. So it's just going to start dropping down. Now for it to drop down, then we need to have gravity. Let's say it's 800, and then we also need a jump strength. Let's say minus 300. So I'll explain what each of these numbers mean and what they do. It'll come clearer in just a second. But when we load up this bird, if you type on load, you should see that it comes up automatically. And so what I want to do here is to load the bird sprite image. And then let's have a jump, or like a flap So whenever the bird flaps, then we're going to update their velocity to be the jump. And then the other thing we need to do here is the update. So this will update every second. And so what we're going to do is every second, let's apply the gravity onto our velocity. And we're going to update the bird's position based on this current velocity. Awesome, so that's our bird class. If we come back to our game, let's say late, and then we've got our bird, and then let's load everything in the beginning. And what you want to do here is, once you initialize the bird as the bird class, you want to add it like this. Now it looks like we have a bit of an error. It says unable to load assets, and it looks like it needs to be in the assets and then the images. So let's fix that up. For us, we currently have it in just the assets folder. So I'm going to create a new folder called images and just drag all this in there. And so let's come back to our pubspec.yaml and update where we've got our assets. And then if I save this and I run it again, you can see there's the bird. And so coming back to our bird class, you can see these numbers you can change around. Like for example, the gravity, instead of 800, let's say 100, then you can see it's falling much more slower. So you can literally control all these numbers. One very important and useful thing you should do is to create a new file called constants. And I'm going to put all the constant numbers in here. So for example, let's say const double and the bird starting position for the X and the Y. So instead of specifying a actual number like this, I want you to just say bird start X, bird start Y. And same thing for the size. So I'm going to call this bird width and bird height. So this way, later, once we build this game and you want to change the properties of this game, you can just change it in this constant file. So for example, I want to make the bird bigger, then let's just change this bird width and the bird height, and so on. And same thing with the gravity and the jump strength. So all of these constants I'm going to put in a separate file. Sweet, so now that we have a bird that falls down, let's try to tap on the screen to make the bird jump. So if you come to this Flappy Bird game, we're extending the flame game, and then now let's say with tap detector. And so on tap, let's just go to our bird and call the flap method. And you can see I can now start jumping. And again, just to show you, we can control the jump strength, right? If I say like minus 1,000, the jump's going to be huge. So you can control all these numbers. Cool, so now let's add in a background. So we're going to have a background class to extend the sprite component, similar to what we did for the bird. And let's initialize the background position and size. So for this, I'm going to accept the size as a parameter so that we can know the device size, because it will be different for different screen sizes. And the position 0, 0, we're just going to start at the very beginning. So on the load, let's load up the background sprite image. And then come back to our game and let's initialize it here. Hey, there's my background. Now one thing is we can't see the bird, and so the order in which you add these things actually matters. So let's add the bird at the very end. Cool, there it is. Sweet, so we've got the bird, the background. Now let's do the ground. So let's initialize it. And then when we load it, we're going to set the size and the position. And another helpful and useful thing you can do here is say with has game ref for our Flappy Bird game. And so what that does is when we come down here to select the size of the ground, we can say gameref.size and then X. So that is essentially just the width of the screen. And then for the height of the ground, let's just specify it to be like 200. Sweet, and then let's specify the position. I'm just going to say 0, 0 at the top just to see if it works. And then finally, let's load the ground sprite image. Nice, and then let's bring this all back together in our game.dat file. Sweet, and there's our ground. So you can see it's at the top, right? So we can control this position. Now the X coordinate I'm fine with, but then the Y coordinate, let's say the size of the entire screen in terms of the height, and then let's minus the ground height. So this number 200 is another constant, which I'm going to just separate it out here. And it's looking good so far. So naturally, the next thing that we need to do is I want to make this ground have a scrolling effect. So it feels like we're moving along the screen. So on the update, which this will update every second, we're going to move the ground to the left. And so you can see over time, it's slowly moving to the left, and you can control this number to make it faster and slower. And this ground scrolling speed, I'm also going to separate out as a constant so we can keep track of it. Cool. Now, obviously, when we move this ground to the left, it's disappearing. So what you can do is for the size of the ground, I'm actually going to times 2. So make it double so that we can have an infinite scroll. So now if you come down to the update, we're going to reset the ground if it goes off the screen to have that infinite scroll effect. So in terms of the actual math, we're just going to check if half of the ground has been passed, then let's just reset that. Nice. And then if you save this, you can see it's just a continuous scroll. Nice. And then now if we die and we have a game over, let's implement this. So obviously starting at the beginning is game over is going to be false. And whenever we call this method, then we're going to say is game over is now true. And then we can pause the engine, right? So let's try to implement this game over. Now, if we come back to our ground, I want you to put a comma and also add in this collision callbacks. And it's actually really easy to do. So on the load, let's add a collision box. So kind of like this hitbox. And same thing for the bird. I'm going to say with collision callbacks, and we're going to add a hitbox. And so at the very bottom, let's implement the collision with another object. So if you just start typing on collision, it'll just show up right away. And what we want to do is we just want to check if the bird collides with the ground. So if the other component is ground, then let's go to our parent and call that game over method. And then finally bring it back to our game.dart. And we've got the tap detector. Let's also say has collision detection. And if I save this, you can see that the bird is going to hit the ground and then the engine's going to stop. Beautiful, which means naturally the next thing we want to do is show some sort of dialog box for the user. And just say game over, and let's give them an option to restart the game. So if they do want to restart the game, then obviously let's pop the box and go to this reset game and just reset everything back to the initial. So the bird position, the bird velocity, bring it back to 0, is game over, is false, and we can now resume the engine. Sweet, so if you save this and run it again, bird's gonna die, game over, and then we can hit restart, and then we can keep playing. Sweet, so we've done the bird, we've done the background, the ground, now it's time for the pipes. So let's create a pipe.dart. And a pipe similar to the ground, we also want to have the collision callbacks. And firstly, let's just determine if this pipe is the top one or the bottom one. And then let's initialize the pipes with the position and the size. Now, one thing we definitely need to know is I'm going to require the boolean is top pipe. Cool, so let's load the sprite image. Now, depending on if this is the top pipe, if it is, then load the pipe underscore top.png, and otherwise load the bottom one. Cool, and similarly, let's add a hitbox for the collision. And on the update, so every second, we want to scroll the pipe to the left, similar to the ground. And then with the pipe, we're going to remove it if it goes off the screen. Cool, so this is a pipe. Now, with pipes, we're going to need another file called a pipe manager because we need to spawn multiple pipes as we go along. So I'll show you how to do this. We're going to have a pipe manager class extending component with has game reference of our Flappy bird. So when we update every second, we will continuously spawn new pipes when necessary. So I'm going to keep track of this thing called a pipe spawn timer. So we could say on the update, we're going to generate a new pipe at a given interval. Okay, this DT is in seconds. All right, so let's say that the pipe interval is 50. And so if we exceed this pipe interval, then just reset the timer, and then we're going to spawn a new pipe. So let's do that down here. I want to know the screen height, the pipe gap, where the bird can fly through. And we also want to keep track of the minimum pipe height. Like we want to set it so that, say like 50 is the smallest it could be. Control the pipe width. And we're going to need to do some calculation for the pipe heights because we just want to randomize them, right? Firstly, get the max pipe height, which is the entire screen minus the ground, minus the gap, minus the minimum pipe. So this is the maximum possible height we could have. And so let's start by calculating the height of the bottom pipe. So what we're going to do is randomly select between the min and the max. And then height of the top pipe, which we can now calculate using the bottom pipe's height. And then now we have all the dimensions to create the pipes. So let's start with the bottom pipe. So we need to specify the position and the size. Starting with the position, so we've got the x coordinate, and for the y coordinate, screen height minus ground height minus bottom pipe height. and then we can specify the size, and let's do the similar thing for creating the top pipe. Great, and at the end we can add both pipes to the game. Cool, and then bring this all back together in our Flappy Bird game. We can initialize this pipe manager. Now, one thing I realized is the pipe interval. This is in seconds. So 50 seconds is quite a long time. Let's say we want a new pipe every 2 seconds. And if I save this, yeah, you can see all of these pipes that are getting generated. And you can also see the randomization of the pipes too. Cool, so it's looking good. Now it looks like the collision is not working on the pipes. So if you come back to our bird.dart, we are currently checking if the bird collides with the ground. So let's also check if the bird collides with the pipes. And there we go, we can now crash into pipes. Beautiful. And again, any of these constants like pipe interval, I'm going to put it in the constant file. Cool. And so you can control everything you need to control in this constant file. For example, the pipe gap, we can make it much bigger. Now, one thing I realized is when we die and we restart the game, we need to reset the pipes as well. So we're going to need to remove all pipes from the game with this line of code. And if I just run this, I'll die and then I restart and it looks like the pipes are getting reset as well. Cool, so now it's time for the scores. So let's start with score is equal to 0 and then just have an increment score method. And create a new component called score.dart. So this one is we're going to extend the text component. And so when I initialize this, let's just say the text is 0. And when I load, let's set the position to be in the kind of lower middle, like where the ground is. So in terms of the X, we're going to center horizontally. In terms of the Y, we want it slightly above the very bottom. Cool. And then so on the update method, let's grab the new text from the game's score. And if it's something new, then we're going to just update the text. Bringing it back to our Flappy Bird game, we've done everything. Now it's time for the score. And if I just save this, you can see there is the 0 score and it's looking very small and white. So for the score text, you can go to the text renderer and specify the style. So I'm just going to make it dark gray and let's make it a bigger font. And there it is on the bottom. Cool. And then finally, we just need to be able to update this score, right? So let's go to our pipe and let's just say initially the scored is false. So we haven't gone past a pipe yet. And then on the update, so when we scroll the pipe to the left, let's check if the bird has passed this pipe, right? So we haven't scored yet. And also the position of our bird plus the size of the bird, the position of the pipe plus the size of the pipe. If that's gone past the bird position, then we can increment the score. And let's only increment it for the top pipe so that we avoid double counting. Cool, and if I save this, yay, you can see we are now able to have the high score. Cool. And so just to finish it off, when we die in this game over dialog box, in the content, let's just display the high score or the person's score. And then when we reset the game, reset the score to be 0. Nice. So let's just play this one more time. And then when I die, you can see that it tells us what the score is and we can restart.